So for months, the whispers about Xi Jinping having lost power have gone wild. The latest rumor is that the party elders are deliberating the political model in the post Xi Jinping era. Let's cover that tonight. All right, there's a Chinese blogger on social media on X named Wu Zuolai. So according to Mr. Wu, some party insiders have floated the Singapore model. There are a couple of models that they're debating amongst themselves. First is the Singapore model, which is a blend of Confucian style authoritarianism and Western capitalism. We'll take a closer look at the Singapore model in just a little while. The emerging consensus, according to Mr. Wu, among the leaders is this. The Vietnam model might be the most realistic option. Why? Because it's similar enough to the current CCP system to be acceptable, but with some internal checks and balances. So, all right, so let's talk about what the Vietnamese model is or actually looks like. It gives us some indications of what the party elders have in mind. So before 2011, Vietnam was basically following the Deng Xiaoping playbook. In fact, Vietnam launched its own version of reform and opening up as early as 1986. But in 2011, during the VCP's 11th National Congress, they formally proposed something called Socialism with Vietnamese Cultural Characteristics. And that was the beginning of the Vietnam model. So Vietnam is still ruled by a communist party, but here's the big difference. It has implemented political reforms that the CCP has been talking about for decades, but never actually done. The reforms in Vietnam are limited, but still a giant step ahead of the CCP. So there are 6 key areas where Vietnam is ahead of the CCP in terms of opening up. The first is competitive elections for the National Assembly. Vietnam's National Assembly has 500 members elected through a multi-candidate system, and it's called differential voting. So this is how it works. There are more candidates than seats. So not everyone wins. Most of the candidates are party approved, but under a 5-to-3 ratio. It means that about 40% of the candidates are expected to be eliminated. In other words, candidates have to earn voter support to get elected. And anyone over 18 can vote. That alone sets Vietnam apart from China tremendously. So yes, it's still under party control, and there have been scandals like pre-selected winners or token candidates that were set up only to be eliminated. But it's still a step beyond China's rubber stamp system. So that's number one. Number two is self-nominated candidates do exist in Vietnam. So the country allows independent self-nominated candidates, people who aren't party insiders. And if they collect enough signatures from voters in their district, they can get on the ballot. They still face obstacles, but it means some voices from outside the party can participate. Roughly 5 to 10% of National Assembly members come through this route. It's not perfect, but again, it's a step forward compared to China. And number three is there's a vote of confidence system in place. Vietnam's National Assembly holds confidence votes on senior officials. So lawmakers can rate them. They could give them a high confidence, a confidence vote, or a low confidence vote. These votes don't carry legal consequences or rewards, but they are public and transparent. So the results are published, which puts real pressure on officials. And compared to China's silent, obedient NPC, National People's Congress, Vietnamese lawmakers are far more outspoken. They have more power, and they can raise sensitive issues that Chinese delegates wouldn't dare to touch. And the fourth difference is that it has to do with the power decentralization at the very top. Vietnam doesn't put everything in one man's hands. It has a collective leadership system. The top 4 positions are held by 4 different individuals. So there you have the general secretary of the party, who is also the head of the military commission. And then they have a president. And then they have a prime minister. They also have the chair of the National Assembly. So these four top leaders are considered the four highest ranking officials, right? This spreads out power, at least more than in China, where Xi Jinping holds all three top jobs, and the premier and the chair of the national NPC work like his secretaries. And number 5 is Vietnam has an expanded Politburo, and leaders at the top has a broader participation in decision making. So Vietnam has a Politburo as well, but they have no standing committee like the CCP. That means decisions are made by a larger group, not just 7 people or even one person. The Central Committee is also more active. It participates in high-level decision-making, unlike in China, where everything is top-down from Xi Jinping. And number 6, open internet access. Vietnam doesn't have a great firewall. People can access international websites without a VPN, or most of the international websites. So that means more exposure to global information. It's a powerful tool for opening minds. So when you compare today's Vietnam to China, the contrast is like day and night. It's starting to feel like Vietnam versus North Korea. So Vietnam is cautiously moving forward. China is still stuck in what people call the Stone Age of communist dictatorship. Now, does this mean Vietnam is on its way to democracy? Not so fast. Vietnam still faces all the usual problems of a communist state, which is absolute party control and corruption. The Vietnam model is, in my opinion, just a strategic loosening, an attempt to relax the grip just enough to avoid public backslash and also losing international support or trust. It's still a leash, just a longer one. And that tells us something deeper. Communist rule is the rope. The system is the shackle. So why not cut the rope entirely? Why not fully free the people? Actually, there are voices in Vietnam pushing for that. But the regime has fired back. On March 9th, Vietnam's National Defense Journal published an article titled, "Remain Vigilant Against Calls to Change Vietnam's Political System." The opening line, "Calls to change Vietnam's current political system are an extremely insidious tactic by hostile forces. Their aim is to promote political pluralism, multi-party systems, and steer Vietnam toward a capitalist regime. These appeals are extremely dangerous. We must confront them head on." Sounds very familiar, right? It's exactly the same language we hear from the CCP. So even if Vietnam has taken steps forward, as long as one-party rule remains, the shackles are on. Now, let's talk about the Singaporean model. The CCP once publicly denounced Singapore as a running dog of American imperialism. However, Deng Xiaoping was very impressed by what he saw during that trip to Singapore. He was impressed by the city-state's stability, clean and efficient government, and thriving economy, all under an authoritarian system dominated by the Li family. After his return, Deng sent several delegations to study Singapore. However, some Chinese scholars based in China sarcastically describe Singapore as the most beautifully and meticulously constructed pig pen in the world. What does that mean? So this analogy suggests that while citizens live comfortably, they lack the freedom to challenge the system. There's no true freedom, just a well-managed life defined entirely by the will of the ruler and his ruling party. You follow the rules laid out for you, and in return, you enjoy stability, order, and a certain amount of wealth and contentment, all within a polished and sanitized environment. Now, that may sound harsh, but it does reflect the underlying shortcomings of the Singapore or the Singaporean model. It is a combination of authoritarian politics and an open market economy. Although there are elections, they are one-party game. So can China replicate the polished pig pen model? Not really, because at its core, Singapore is capitalist. While its political system is authoritarian or somewhat authoritarian, it still incorporates democratic features. Economically, it shows a deep respect for the market. And this is something the CCP struggles to accommodate. Also, Singapore's refinement and effectiveness is built upon its legal system, which the CCP isn't compatible with. Rule of law is an existential threat to the regime, and that's just too much to ask. So the CCP aims to grow the economy, maintain absolute one-party control, and achieve high efficiency with low corruption, all without allowing freedom of speech. That's, in my opinion, pure wishful thinking. So, as long as the Communist Party still rules, the idea of modeling China after Singapore is a false proposition. So, here's the question. What if the CCP adopts the Vietnam model? I think that's also not going to work because the CCP has run out of time to take baby steps in adopting political reforms like Vietnam did. The Chinese people have no more patience left. That doesn't mean Beijing will not adopt the Vietnamese model. I mean, they may, but it will just be a delayed tactic. It will be a new wrapper for the new dictatorship. In fact, I don't think the CCP can even make it that far. And here's why. The regime's blood debt is far deeper than Vietnam's. The killings for the past 5 decades or 6 decades, the oppression, the systemic abuse of power, it runs much, much deeper. Their moral liability is beyond redemption. And the Chinese people, I think they're done giving the CCP time. Because when a house is completely run down and about to crumble, it just cannot be remodeled. It's impossible. It can only be demolished and rebuilt. So only by dismantling the party, root and branch, can China finally turn the page.